Well, hello everyone. This is Alicia from Call for Convent Reform. I know it's been a while. I have thought about doing podcasts and have been thinking about different shows to do, so I haven't completely neglected those of you who are listening, but it can be obviously a little difficult to come on and talk about some of these things, and it can be really easy for me to just kind of procrastinate and think, oh, I'll do it later. But I do have some things I do want to do in the future. I do have some ideas and some people I'm talking to about getting on this podcast to tell their own stories and kind of give a fuller picture of what's going on in religious life, because I know I'm just one person, and I've obviously have told my story on here pretty extensively, I would say, for the most part. But obviously, it gives people more insight when they hear from different people and their experiences. And one thing that I notice from victims of religious order abuse is that there's definitely a lot of connections. When you get together and you start talking to these people, it's almost like, wow, you're hearing someone's story, and you're thinking, wow, I could write that, or I could say that. That was my experience, or something very similar. So even though that's one thing that amazes me over and over again, is that even though religious order abuse happens all over the place and in all kinds of different religious orders, contemplative, monastic, apostolic, all these different orders and all these different places, the traits of abuse are very similar. And so I think one way I can show that is by getting other people on here to tell their stories. And so if you are someone who has been a victim of religious order abuse, feel free to contact me. I would love to have you on here sometime. We can just have a very casual conversation, and just talk about your story. I'm always very accommodating, whether people want to give their full name or not give their name, or I understand that can be kind of tricky, because sometimes, because of different things, you don't want to give your full name, you don't want the order. A lot of people are afraid of legal action by the order, which is very sad. It's almost like a continuation of abuse, that they feel like they can't really tell their story because they will be some contacted by some lawyer. But it's just what it is. It is what it is, unfortunately. So, but for this episode, I wanted to kind of take a different approach, because it's something I've been thinking about kind of off and on. And, I've obviously told a lot of stories, a lot of grim tales about my experience in religious life, but I think one thing that can be asked is, do I have any positive experiences? Do I have any thing I'm grateful for that happened in that time period? And I would like to start with a disclaimer that I am not particularly endorsing religious life. I feel like nowadays I'm kind of in this limbo area of whether I openly endorse religious life or not. I'm always very careful when I hear someone saying that, I'm looking at an order. If I know anything, I'll kind of tell them what I've heard or what I know, and just tell them. I never tell a person what to do. I never tell them, hey, you need to stay away from this order. you need to stop discerning. I never say that, but I do tell people, hey, you need to be careful. This is what I've heard. This is what I've been told. And just keep your eyes out. Keep your head on your shoulders. Don't get whiffed away by a religious order that's promising you the world, and then they're gonna give you not much back. So that's kind of my approach, because I don't feel like that's my place to really tell someone what to do with their life. It can be the place of other, superiors and stuff, but it's not my place. Or at least I think it is. I should say it's really not their place either. But yeah, that's kind of how I deal with it, and that's how I kind of approach it. So I'm not using this as an endorsement of religious life. I think, people are going to keep discerning religious life. I'm not going to destroy religious life with my little microphone here and my little blog. And that's never really what I've intended to do, but I have always been wanting to call out what's going on, calling out the religious order abuse that happens and continues to happen in convents and monasteries, and in seminaries. And I still get emails from people, fairly regularly, telling me that, oh, I found your blog. I was in a such and such order, and what you've said really relates to my experience, and it's just so tragic. I just it's really a shame. So that being said, that's my disclaimer. I'm not endorsing religious life. I'm not saying, this is not a vocational story, like you'd see on some diocesan website where I'm telling my vocation story to get you to sign up for some religious order. I'm just mentioning some of the positive things, because obviously there was some good things, in a sense. And, even though it was a terrible experience, I would never, ever, ever want to be living with those people again. The experience taught me a lot about the church, a lot about myself. So I just want to share some of that with you. So I have a little hit list here. I'm going to go to it. And yeah. So to start off, one thing that I am kind of grateful for, that I was able to learn, is I obviously learned how to pray the divine office, or the liturgy of the hours, however you want to call it. The old term is divine office. But it's obviously what religious and the church pray every day, religious and priests. They say it during set times during the day, and there's so many hours that you pray. You can pray more. So, there's monasteries that pray all of them. Of course, I'm talking to people that aren't familiar with how this works. And then more apostolic communities usually pray maybe 3 or 4 of them. Like morning prayer, evening prayer, and night prayer, usually the bare minimum. So, learning how to pray the divine office, and I'm still not perfect at the divine office or the liturgy of the hours. I for some reason, I have a hard time remembering to go back. I want to just stay on the page, because you have to go back. That's, that happens a lot because of feast days or whatever. And I just want to, I guess my brain wants to be lazy and just stay on the page. When I was on retreat last summer, and I was praying with a group of nuns that did happen to me where I didn't go back. I was just kind of like in my own head and wasn't thinking, and they were like, oh, they were like, this poor sister was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I should have told you. And I'm like, no, I knew, but I just didn't go back. So but that being said, that's kind of why it's nice for me now to say it on my own, because I don't have to deal with, someone looking at over my shoulder and saying, oh, you're doing it wrong. I think God understands if I'm half awake in the morning and I'm forgetting to go back or whatever. So that was a good experience, in a sense. And then learning some prayers, learning some spiritualities. The order I was with had a nation spirituality. If you're not in the know of different spiritualities in the Catholic Church, there's like Dominican and Benedictine and all these different spiritualities. And this particular order was very Ignatian, and that really resonated with me. I'm still very Ignatian in a lot of ways in my spirituality. For instance, the Anima Christi, I still pray that prayer every time I receive communion. It's one of my favorite prayers. So just learning different prayers, learning more about prayer and different spiritualities was a positive for me. And then I also got to experience different things. Another thing that was beneficial was, being a religious, you kind of get some perks, slight perks. So when Rhoda Weiss, if you don't know Rhoda Weiss, you can kind of look her up. She was a friend of Mother Angelica's up in Canton, Ohio, where I was. And so the Rhoda Weiss house was only like 6 months away from where I was living at the time. And her beatification process started while I was up there, living up there. And so I was able to go to that mass and see that whole process, which was really cool. See the box with all the things that were going to be sent to Rome. And it was sealed and there's prayers said, and it's a really cool service. So that was, not many people get to experience that. And that was really neat. Another thing that I would say has been beneficial for me is just and this is kind of subtle, but just the experience of being a religious. I've found that trying to figure out how to say this, but there's definitely a connection there. If you tell someone, oh, I was in religious life, and someone who is in religious life, you automatically have a rapport with that person. It's like, I don't know, being in some hobby or something, like sailing club, I guess, or chess club, and you tell someone else like, oh, I'm also into chess or sailing or whatever. You're gonna make a bond with that person because of your experience. And it also helps as well with priests. I think I have found that when I tell priests that I have experience of being religious for several years, that it kind of helps them. I don't know, not helps them, but they're just like, okay, like there's some things you will understand a little more than some lay people, just because of the experience. It's not because of like a class thing or anything, or but it's because of the experience of being in that kind of realm, I guess, and wearing a habit and just being this public figure, and people are looking at you, and so and it's really helped me personally, because I already have a love for priests, but it's helped me to kind of understand priests a little more, and to realize like they're a public figure, like how that must be for them to just be out in public and people automatically know who they are, and how that must be for them, to be, you know, on, I don't know, just kind of in the public's eye, to be another Christ, and people watching you, people looking up to you, and they're doing it 24/7. They're doing it all the time, and for that reason, I can kind of understand. I can kind of understand why religious and some priests have been tempted to be in lay clothes, honestly, because and I'm not endorsing it, but I'm just saying it I can kind of see it, because when you're in that spotlight all the time, sometimes you don't, like, sometimes I was Sister Alicia in the convent, and sometimes I just wanted to be Alicia. I really longed for that, especially at the end when I was really struggling. So, having that experience of being in that role has been very eye-opening. Another thing that I am grateful for, and I'm truly grateful for this, is that I was one of, I don't know, some people have a different experience going to the convent, but when I initially got out, I was severely depressed, like severely depressed, and I was just completely deflated. And the only thing I can really relate it to is people who have experienced divorce. I think that's the only thing I can, say that I've heard their experiences and said, okay, that relates to what I went through, and how I was feeling, and my mindset at the time. But it also slowly through that process helped me to have more faith, more courage in myself. I don't doubt myself as much. I kind of make choices and stick by them a little more. Because I really doubted myself a lot in the convent. I was always doubting myself and thinking, oh, it's just me, making excuses for the community, and just thinking, it's my fault. This is me. I'm the one that needs to change. Something's wrong with me. I'm just not seeing things right. And that's what I was told as well. But I was also telling this to myself. And obviously, the longer I was there, the more I realized, I was feeling deep down that something's not right. The things that are happening around me aren't right. But, I'm trying to convince myself that, that's a lie. That's a lie from the devil, or that's a lie from, my own pride, or that for whatever reason it's not true. And in the end, I realized that there was something ringing inside of me, like a loud horn or a loud bell, trying to say deep down, and I kept bearing it, but I was, the whatever this was telling me, no, something is not right here. This is not how you should be treated. And I would have those thoughts. I would say, like, I'm supposed to be a bride of Christ, but I'm being treated like crap. But then I would be like, oh, well, I shouldn't think that way. And so, I now that I've gone through that, I just, I take my own feelings about things, my own opinions about things a little more seriously. And that doesn't mean I just kind of, I've always been a very thoughtful, conscientious person. I'm not saying that I'm just like, making rash decisions and that type of stuff. I'm still very cautious. And I still like to bounce ideas off of people because sometimes I don't see things, or I think or I'll be mad at something and I realize, oh, maybe I'm seeing this the wrong way or something like that. So I'm not saying that I'm just like rash, but in general, like I trust my instinct more from that. And, it's something I'm kind of proud of, like that I'm proud of myself that I've been able to grow from such a terrible situation. Kind of to lean into that same idea is that I've learned who I can trust. And again, it's not 100%, but if I have a feeling about someone and I'm like, or someone is in a position of being an authority above me and they're not treating me well, or they're putting me down, or, it's like, oh, I've seen this before, you know, I don't think I can trust this person. And I'm going to have to make another life choice, I guess. So that has also helped. Another thing I would say is that I've learned more about being a part of a community of faith. I kind of have a different story than most people because I'm a convert to the Catholic faith, and I didn't come in and with like a youth group in particular. I mean, I eventually joined a youth group, but I did it very solitarily in a lot of respects. A lot of people come into the church because they meet someone and they start talking to that person and they become convinced to become Catholic. That wasn't my experience. I've told my story before, but just very brief. To kind of say it again, I came into the church after searching for truth. At 15, I know it's like I wasn't a normal kid, but I was searching for truth, and I wanted to know what the truth was, and I was willing to follow it. And I just said, God, if you're God or whoever you are, show me the way, show me what the truth is. And so from that, I was led into the Catholic faith and ended up joining when I was 18. So I never really had, I mean, I would have Catholic friends here and there, and I've always been, I've always been a very shy person. I am very introverted, and I've come a long way because when I was a kid, I was just petrified of talking. And here I am talking on a microphone, but yeah, so I just kind of kept to myself, and I made some friends, but it wasn't like, I was always very timid about it. It was always kind of like not a close friendship. And it's kind of weird in a way, but being in the convent kind of and this is it's weird because the community was so toxic. The community was so, I mean, the community encompassed everything about my life. And you thought about the community before you thought about yourself, to the point that you were secondary to this hive mind of what the community thought and what the community believed and what the community wanted. And then of course there were people in the community that had more influence. So of course their kind of weight on what should happen in the community or what they wanted had more influence. Even though you were supposed to put, everyone was supposed to put their own wants and desires aside for the community, but obviously that wasn't always 100%. So it's a very interesting dynamic. I'm sure psychologists would love to do a case study on it, but it's very strange. Um, but, when I left religious life, one of the things I really struggled with was going to mass by myself again, because I'd always gone to mass by myself. But when I was in religious life, I did everything with the community, everything. And I mean, especially spiritually. And I didn't really realize it until coming out of the convent and going to mass by myself and saying the rosary by myself again and doing divine office or liturgy the hours by myself again. I was just for five some years, a little less than 5 years. I was constantly doing everything in my spiritual life with the community. There was the only thing we didn't do was the sisters would say the Stations of the Cross every day and do spiritual reading and meditation, which is pretty par for the course in a lot of religious communities. So that would be done by yourself, but most of the divine office, except for the night prayer, which is the last prayer of the day, and mass, rosary, all that was said together. So when I left the convent and my world was completely turned around, and all of a sudden I'm doing everything by myself again, which at first I was used to. Like I had this weird transition of doing everything with the community and doing everything with other people to doing it all by myself again. It's made me realize that community is good. I used to poo-poo it and think, oh, I don't really, need friends in the parish, or, I can just kind of do my own thing because, I'm so introverted. I really just no one wants to talk to me and I don't want to talk to anyone else. I know it's terrible, but it's called being antisocial. But it's made me realize that, yeah, it is good to have community. It is good to build community, and it's something I really have to work on because it does not come in easy for me at all. At all. And if you've met me, you probably can see that. But even coming on here, I think that's part of the reason it's hard to do podcasts and stuff, because it's like I just kind of stay to myself, and that's kind of where I feel comfortable. Even though I'm around people, I work with kids, I'm a teacher, but I'm very, very introverted. So that's something that I've learned from my experience of being in the convent. And the last thing I would say is that, and I wouldn't say I'm a history junkie, but I really like history. I really like to learn about the ins and outs of things, especially things that I'm passionate about. And I am pretty passionate about religious life because of living it and being part of this ministry of sorts, of helping people who have also been abused in it. But I would say that something else that I've really learned and have encountered being in religious life is learning about the history of it and learning about just a lot of things in the church that have happened, especially in religious life. I think I probably had an interesting perspective living with the sisters I lived with, because they were coming up as women and as sisters during the whole Vatican II changes, which were if you don't know about Vatican II and the changes that occurred in religious life after. And I knew some of it. I didn't know how extensive it went. I didn't know about if you really want to get down a rabbit hole, look up the age of experimentation in religious life. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. That the Vatican would even allow it. It was just pretty much like a green light, like, do what you want, do what you need to do, and kind of decide what you want to do, and experiment with habits or no habits, or I mean, what there were supposed to be guidelines, really, but if you want to get down to brass tacks, there are people in the church that had agendas and kind of didn't let people know about those guidelines. So it got really, really crazy. And I've heard all kinds of stories. I mean, maybe I could do a podcast on that. Some of the stories I heard when I was in religious life about things that happened in the old days during the Vatican II changes. Just nuts. And these are things that the sisters that I lived with experienced themselves. Like, having mass at a pew instead of the altar, because that was the new thing to do. And, changing the different types of breads at mass, and just crazy stuff. And they were running into priests that were experimenting with not being celibate anymore because they thought that was going to change. So they were running into priests at different events who had girlfriends with them. And it's just a really nutty time. If you want to give some of the sisters any kind of benefit of the doubt or any grace, who lived during that period, for some of their actions, you could probably do it because of Vatican II, because of what happened in religious life. It's insane. You see some of the pictures of, for instance, some of the things that happened with the habit. A lot of these sisters, if you looked at them, especially in the 50s, because from what I understand and what I've read, there was kind of a movement in the 30s or 50s or somewhere in there to kind of simplify. I know that sounds insane, but somewhat simplify habits, because some of the habits, if you've ever looked up, go on Pinterest sometime and look up habits. I've seen habits where the sister from like the 20s, where the sister had like a huge rosary wrapped around her. Can you imagine living with that all day? Like with how do you even practically move around? Like, some of them were just so ridiculous. So I think there was a bit of a change that was asked for, and they kind of calm some of the habits down, because they were, really insane. So in the 50s, obviously you have these habits that are kind of stereotypical, right? The black and white penguin habit that most sisters had, and with the wimple and all that stuff. And for some of these religious orders, either they went from there's actually a lot of cool pictures of I know I'm kind of getting in this rant because this is kind of interests me. It's the one thing that I kind of like to get into. But there are pictures you can find of like basically fashion shows that these sisters put on to test out different habits. So you'll see like these pictures from the old days of like these sisters just sitting around in the old fashioned habit, and they have younger sisters usually that are walking around basically like doing almost kind of like, not really catwalk, but doing this walk around to show like this new kind of modern habit. So it's just a bizarre time. And of course, some of the communities, a lot of them actually had, even for a short time, they had like a modernized habit, and then they eventually got rid of it altogether. So even like the ones that don't wear a habit today, I have found from kind of studying them that they did have a brief time where they did have a modernized, I don't know what you call it, a habit, and then they were just like, no, we're going to completely get rid of it. And it happened very quickly. But I have heard stories of, including a friend of mine who told me this story, that she was taught by a religious order of German nuns, very strict. I guess they were not very nice at all. And so they had a very traditional habit. And one day they just walk in and like just are wearing leg clothes. So literally they did not warn the children at all. You have Sister Margarita, Benedicta, Therese of the Holy Cross, wearing 90 yards of fabric, to her coming in the next day and she's wearing leg clothes. And, that was a shock. She talks even to this day about how it was a complete shock to her to see this nun. You could see her skin, like you could see something of skin besides her face and her hands. And just a really raucous time. Really, really just terrible. It was really a terrible time in the church because there was just so much chaos and confusion, and a lot of people just felt hurt and left. And so that being said, as I go down my little rabbit hole, it has been interesting to learn about that. I find that interesting. I find, and I have read books about sisters and about religious, and so I'm a bit of a scholar. No, I'm just kidding. But I have like kind of done some studying on it a little bit, because it just kind of interests me. And I think some of the issues that happened back in the 60s and 70s with Vatican II kind of led into some of the issues we see today. And that would be another conversation for another day, but I'll just leave it at that. So yeah, that's basically what I came up with. I could think of that I would say that I have kind of come away with from religious life, just having a better understanding of, or a better experience of. And and at the end of the day, and this is something I've had to come to terms with, and it's been very difficult because there was a time in my life that I was just like, God, why did you allow this to happen? This was so hurtful and so painful. Why did you allow this to happen? And I have to have faith that there's a reason God allowed it. That's all I can say. I don't understand it. I probably will never understand it until I, get to join him in the beatific vision. But I know there's a reason for it. I don't know what it is. And I think a lot of women are in that same spot, that they have been crushed by an experience in religious life, and have had to pick up the pieces of their lives and try to completely refit them back together, which was my experience. I mean, you go from having absolutely nothing to having to rebuild your life all over again from scratch. And thank God for my family that they gave the little that they could give, but without them, I would have had nothing. I would have probably been on the street. I don't know. I really don't know. And I don't know if, I don't know. I don't know what they would have done if I didn't have my family. I don't know what they would have done with me. Because they definitely didn't want me around anymore. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what I came away with. And, but yeah, I have to look back on it and just think, okay, God, you allow this for some reason. And I think some of these things that I've come up with are some of the reasons maybe God allowed this to happen, and obviously helping other people that have gone through this, because I was actually just told this week that, which is shocking, and I won't say names or anything, but I know CMSWR is listening. Not, I don't know if they're listening to this podcast. Maybe they are, but I know they're watching my blog. I was told that by a very good source. And so I was told that they are actually paying attention and actually, being somewhat responsive, at least in their own decisions about what I'm saying and what I'm reporting on. And if they are, great. I think a lot more needs to be done, but I'll give credit where credit's due. And if they are paying attention and being open to what I'm saying and what I'm sharing with the world about religious order abuse, then, great. That's a step in the right direction and I'll take it. So yeah, so I think, when I started this, I remember looking on the internet to see if there was anything on convents about people speaking up about, the abuse. And there wasn't anything. And there really, even to this day, there really isn't anything. It really shocks me that there isn't more. The only thing I can really think of in particular is the website for, I think they're called the Sister Servants of Mary. I can't remember exactly. They're like from Argentina. That order, like there are former members on there that have gotten together and have exposed that order. But I mean, that there needs to be more of that. And I don't know. I think a lot of people are scared. I think a lot of people are timid to come out because they just want to move on with their lives. They don't want to deal with it. I've had people tell me that. I've had people tell me that they just want to move on. They tell me what happened. I asked them, can I have your story, or can you come on my podcast? And they just say, no, I just want to share what I went through, but otherwise I just want to move on. And I understand that. Like, I totally understand that. But if I'm helping to give a voice to people that, like Pope Francis says, he calls them vulnerable adults, which is not a term you hear a lot often, but basically people that are in a position where they can be manipulated or abused, which is definitely people in seminary and people in religious orders. If I'm helping to give a voice to that, then great. And maybe that's why God allowed all this. And I've thought about that a lot. And if that's why, then, I'm here, Lord, help me to do your will. That's all I can say about that. So, but thank you all for listening. If you have hung around since the end, God bless you, because I definitely do not have a radio voice. And thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. And until next time, God bless.